Let's take a few minutes and talk about telephone negotiating. It's not an ideal situation. It's much easier to build rapport and trust and strengthen the relationship and read the signals that are being sent in person, but it's just not practical anymore to negotiate in person. So there's a few things you can do over the telephone to make your negotiating as productive and positive as possible. So the first thing you want to do is consider the best time to set up the call. Is your counterpart a morning person or an afternoon person? When do they have the time and the energy and the focus that you need in order to get the outcomes you want? Consider that. You always want to have an agenda when you're negotiating over the telephone. It keeps the negotiation on track, uses your time productively, and surprise negotiations to a minimum. In a telephone negotiation, you still want to start with small talk, as you do in person, to relax your counterpart and rebuild rapport. In telephone negotiations, you summarize more often and you give more detail than you normally would. And you want to go back and repeat what you said, perhaps more often than in person, to make sure there's no misunderstanding. It's essential to minimize distractions when you are on a telephone negotiating. Picking up your phone and reading your emails while they're talking could backfire. They probably can tell that you're not giving them your complete attention, and you also might really misunderstand what they said. It's a good idea, the research tells us, within the first 10 minutes of the telephone conversation, to repeat what they just said, especially the last 3 words. So they say, it needs to be finished by Friday. So you say, finished by Friday. It lets them know you heard them. It lets them know you understand how important that is. In telephone negotiation, try to use cooperative language as much as possible. I appreciate your position. I understand why you think that. This kind of language. You want to ask clarifying questions even more than you do in person-to-person, face-to-face negotiation. And you need to add more detail than you might in person to make sure that there's no misunderstanding. And common courtesy, if you're going to be even just a few minutes late for your telephone appointment, you send a quick text. Let them know when you will be available. If you call your counterpart and you don't get them, you get a voicemail, leave a message telling them that you want to reset a new meeting. You never want to leave a negotiation offer over voicemail. The research shows that people tend to misunderstand voicemails most of the time. So don't leave a negotiation on voicemail, and if you get a negotiation on voicemail, listen to it a few times to make sure that you understand what's being said. And finally, it is completely appropriate and professional and a good and smart idea to call a caucus or take a break even over the telephone. If they ask you a question that you are not really prepared to answer, or they make an offer that you have to really think about, do not feel put on the spot that you have to answer immediately. It is very professional to say, thanks for the offer. Before I respond, I need to consider a few things. Can I call you back, or can we set another meeting? So caucuses are professional and always a good idea. In conclusion, telephone negotiating is a very practical way to negotiate, and it's here to stay. Just consider the strategies you want to employ to make it as seamless and successful as possible. Use cooperative language, ask clarifying questions, give more details, and always call a caucus before you answer to make sure that whatever you're going to say is what you actually mean and want to say.